All right. So this is our fourth live stream, and today we're going to talk about the potential future of game publishing. Is that right, Patrick? Is that how we're the potential future, or is it the future?
We'll see. We'll see. It's a good question. It's a good question. So, yeah, during the week we met with Carlos Scott. You're just asking about um, Carlos, and he is traveling, so can't join us this time. But we talked a lot about what it would mean to get a publisher and or fundraise, and or kind of do this as a proper startup. And it felt kind of closer to our ethos to find a way to you know put the game more firmly in the hands of our community, and finding a way for people like Carlos who have a lot of passion and energy to help, because really at the end of the day that's what a trading card game is and should be. But then we kind of got thinking about what was the original mission, because it's been 4.5 years of, for me anyway, fairly arcane tech work, as I've had time. And crypto's really taken off and crashed and taken off again and crashed again. Is now taking off again in a pretty spectacular way that frankly was distracting. When we started the project, it was a lot more about, hey, Arcane Tidman, put the spoils up on the shelf. And now that the spoils is gone, maybe it's time to do something on a very small scale. And we looked right away at print and play, but of course realized you can't really do a collectible game with print and play. So that was very much the jam. And so you guys may remember, and maybe this is in a white paper somewhere from back in the day, my first impulse was to call Tim Shields, who runs Cascade Games and now Judge Academy, and say, can we make a print on demand game really just meant for OP? The thought being that there's a channel there for people to engage with it without having to go through the whole, overhead of publishing a game at scale, which, as we know, invariably these games kind of wind up zombies, at least as the historical model. And and around the time I was looking at the blockchain, and I was kind of like, well, gosh, if we print on this distributed ledger, if we release that way, then we can have the collectability component as well as community ownership, and we can essentially do a print and play that's collectible. And from there, we went to disintermediating the supply chain, not for all collectible games, but for a class. And got this bizarro vision of let's go put printers in game stores. Maybe a card doesn't have to be the most, but maybe when you buy your card, it's the cheap version, and then later on you make the expensive version through a nicer print edition. Maybe you just most of your cards you just keep digital and you only print out the ones that are display cards. Who knows? But that's such a weird vision that that was the start. So in a way, talking to Carlos, I kind of, Ken and I kind of came full circle on, we should really get back to our weird initial charter, which has very little to do with promoting crypto. Well, has nothing to do with promoting cryptocurrencies or blockchain at all, and everything to do with disintermediating the trading card game publishing model, and giving games the kind of perpetual or long tail life. And that, frankly, that's what attracted people like Jordan Weissman to our project. Jordan's very much very much a crypto skeptic or crypto. I don't want to speak for Jordan, but he's always kind of had concerns about, well, what does the crypto piece mean? Because of course, as we were going into this project, this is right when crypto is getting a lot of bad press, rightly so. And really, it's all been about dealing with retailer inventory risk, which is huge for small retailers, not consuming a huge amount of cardboard,
Right.
not having to pay our friends at Diamond, card and comic distributors, their 10 or 12% or whatever it is. So yeah, I think now it's time to kind of get back to our roots. That's my monologue for today. Thank you all. Will you join me in a hymn?
Man, my internet's kind of, you have to excuse me, and freaking out. So we're going in and out on my screen, so it's hard to engage right now. But yeah, that was it was a fun talk, and I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential there for smaller indie games. If you are able to publish and print games directly there on the spot. We even talked about, having certain game designers or publishers be able to just offer up for free to game stores the ability to print out this game as kind of a loss leader potentially. And there's a lot of it. Because the cost and the investment is so low for the game store to say, yeah, hey, we'll add this game. And, game designers and, publishers, I'm sure there's tons out there that would just like to get their game played and in the people's hands, even if it's they're getting 1% or no percent of the sale to a customer. And the game store is able to make a little bit of money to help kind of promote and push that game, maybe do a little bit of local organized play just for them. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and it's in the category of stuff we could do. This is definitely even with that use case, it's still deeply experimental and again borderline. Now, okay, there's a business use case, but it's still more like an art project than a the tech startup, which as it should be. I mean, if we wanted to make a lot of money in tech, we'd probably be doing something totally different than trying to disintermediate the trading card game supply chain. Because it's not that huge a market, and the big guys are never going to have a use for this, and that's great.
No, that's not for them. I mean, that's not the point, right?
It's not for them. It's just the tiny niche niche of a niche. We were also talking a bit about how, in a way, this is an opportunity, particularly if we get wild with the vision of like, well, we'll have 3D printers too, to kind of focus more on experiential, features of going to a game shop. It's hard these days as a retailer, I think, to differentiate if you're just putting product on a shelf and not really adding much value, if there's no play space or nothing to do. But the question came up when we were talking about it, and I'm still curious about this, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts. In the early 2000s, smart people said, print on demand is going to completely upend the book publishing industry. And I remember here in Seattle, somebody raced out and bought a print on demand book printer and binder and set up the world's first print on demand bookstore. And then nothing happened. The
Right.
publishing industry continued. Amazon, put Borders out of business. And when I want a book, I still either go to Barnes and Noble and get told they don't have it in stock because most books are online, right? Or I order it from Amazon, or I buy ebooks. So the question I have for you guys is why did print on, because it seemed like such a great use case at the time, why did print on demand not disrupt the traditional book publishing industry? Question mark.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's an important question for where we're trying to go. And kind of back to what we mentioned before, or what I mentioned before, is there's no real community around book publishing, right? So that I think that probably hurts a little bit. And it's just easy to be able to click on Amazon and buy your book, right? You click and you buy, and it gets sent to your house, and there's no destination to have it printed on demand at that destination at the bookstore. So I think that model still exists, right? They still print on demand books, just not locally at the bookstore. Because why, I guess. But for a game, it's different because you have a community rallying around that game or that game store, and they're there, they're hanging out. Like people just hang out. And at a game store, you're like, you maybe between games, or you're bored, or you're waiting for a tournament to start, and you're just checking out other games, browsing. You could easily just be browsing on a computer or on the local store's website to say, hey, what games could we print out? Maybe there's a 5-minute game that we can just print out right now and play while we wait. So I think there's a lot more potential for print on demand gaming than books. Because again, books, I don't know, they're solitary, they're solo. You're not involved with other people, and there's no community really. You can be, I guess, book reading clubs and stuff, but again, it's not the same.
Scott, do you have thoughts on that? I'm not sure if you.
Yeah, what popped into my mind was, I don't know if there's a concept so much for it in trading card games, was abandonware. If there is a class of trading card games that have been abandoned, and the IP has been abandoned, I should say, and I don't want to advocate any infringement or anything like that, but sort of like the Sierra games you can play online nowadays, which is like not unsanctioned. I don't know the legality of it, but it does remind me. I was sort of reminded of those. Like perhaps there are other games that have been abandoned, which we could revive or we could play. That seems like another use case. I think it does make sense to me that
part
of why we did it.
Part of the issue with those abandoned games is sometimes you can't even find them if you wanted to play them. They're impossible to find. They had their print runs are over, and they're getting expensive if you can find them, just because they're hard to find. They may not even be popular, they're just impossible to find. And this gives the ability for publishers to say, you know what, we hold the IP to this, whatever, we're not doing anything with it, we don't want to put more money into it, but here's the files, we'll throw them up on this platform, and people can play it, and we may get a royalty kickback of 1% or 5% or 10% or whatever they want to set up with the in that platform or marketplace. And so there's almost no reason not to add your dead card game that you still own the IP to something like this. Why not? Unless you're planning on actually physically going out and printing more sets, why not just add it to a platform like this where people can still buy go with it?
Yeah, I can't think of a more silly business model than exclusively going after the long tail. But but that's no. I mean, that's what we did. We did it for funsies, So
yeah, we realized real early on that this is a lot better as a mad science project.
Yeah.
I don't think I can sit across the table from any group of investors and say, let's go capture the $300,000 a year dead trading card game market.
It does. At the same time, there are it could be a way to re-release old sets, even for a more established trading card game that you don't want recirculating, or that you don't want to have to. You can't buy into anymore, right? Because there's no way to get those cards. It's too expensive, or they're too rare. Could that, just plenty of use cases for this. It's really.
I wonder if having that channel changes it. I mean, we're dealing with a pretty efficient market, and if you're wondering why aren't publishers reprinting these niche games? It's not that expensive to print at a small scale and sell direct. So the potential return there must be pretty tiny, or the setup costs must be significant, or the reprinting of those games haven't caught up with digital printing, because of course back in the day you'd have to go prepare plates and fly to the place and make sure the colors are correct and blah 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 blah.
I'm sure it's all those things combined, right? Like they all nickel and dime you to get to the end point where you're like, I want to print this game again.
Yeah, though at the end of the day, it's still nickels and dimes. If there were enough of a cohort that really wanted one of these old games, even on a pretty small scale, even if it was just low six figures a year of business, you'd think that that would be a thing. Also, for whatever reason, since it's such a small industry, and since it's been famously so hard to launch TCGs, again, that I what I keep coming back to is none of this disintermediating the supply chain for games. That's fun to think about. There's a cost there, but that isn't the preventative factor, right? That's not the gateway to having a successful game. In other words, it's a pretty significant chunk of the margin, right? It's even 10%. From a retailer's perspective, if they're making 40 to 50%, that 10% is 20% of their chunk, if that makes sense. It's a big chunk of the pie to go away, but most of the effort that the publisher is doing is promotion and OP and marketing. Nobody ever said, let's not publish a game because it's too expensive to print. When we were doing the spoils, it was like, a 90%, 85 to 90% margin, right, on the cost of goods I think even before we sent to the distributor. So a tremendous margin. I mean, it's cardboard. So the cost was, hiring a team of scantily clad promoters and putting them on a tour bus and sending that bus all around the country and giving away, promising to give away prizes. It's where I go with this is hard. It's expensive to launch because of the marketing effort and the support.
I think that's been the case in most markets, though, right? Like whether it's movies, which is now you have YouTube, so that people have YouTube channels where people are producing tons of content without having to market it as much because the community of YouTube is used to consuming that type of media. And so I feel like, and even like Steam, right? Games used to be like, okay, it costs a lot to produce this game, but it really costs a lot to video games to promote this game. Now you have Steam, the Steam community, and there's tons of free games and publishers, and it's just like way wide open now. And I think the communities are learning to consume smaller, less advertised media. Is I guess where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I wonder. I remember in the early days of the iPhone, there weren't that many apps, so this discoverability wasn't as big an issue, and you could definitely exploit the
captured audience.
Yeah, and just the fact that there's a new channel there, and we see that again and again when a channel opens up, and then people rush in, and now to get noticed on Steam, it's all the same crap. You're going to have to go and run ad campaigns and get yourself reviewed, and
that's true.
Gaming blogs, and it's a huge amount of work, just as expensive. The difference now is you don't have to burn media like you did back in the 80s and 90s. You had to go actually physically burn a cartridge or a optical disc, but it may have been the same kind of. I'd have to go back and think about the math there. I mean, that was a crazy expense and risk back in the day. Cartridges were $7 to all the way up to $12 or whatever, and you get one shot to create your inventory for the season, and then if you miss, you're effed. You have too few or too many. So that was an unusual case where the marketing cost actually was probably less than the manufacturing, depending on your scale. The other thing is, rarely do major publishers try to launch new collectible card games against their own games. I know Wizards has tried a number of times and failed to launch additional major CCGs. I don't know if that's because they immediately see cannibalization or if the people simply won't pick those games up. But I remember or the Harry Potter one was a pretty notable flop. I feel like there was a Star Wars one. Or World of Warcraft, I believe that was Upper Deck. But if you look at book publishers and game publishers and movie studios, are constantly having to bring new product, and they try and mitigate their risk by making sequels, but that's not in those spaces a guarantee. So trading card games, I think, are unusual because you're asking people to buy in and play them for the long term, and in reality, I think a gamer can only keep and master a couple of trading card games.
Yeah.
So I you know better than I do, Ken, but I would imagine that if you probably have room for like 2.5 games. Right?
Yeah. Realistically, the brain space just isn't there to keep track of all the other games. and in time too. You're not when you're going to play them all. The games take a little bit of time there, and people to play with. You got to, not only do you have to have all that stuff, you have to have somebody else that's doing the same thing for that same game.
Yeah,
keeping that brain space alive.
And if you like to play a lot of games and you're less concerned about collecting and being part of a long arc of kind of game publishing narrative or whatever the buy-in is to a collectible game, the world is lousy with crappy little games you can play. To the point where I can't go to a game. This is part of why I don't like games. Is when you go to a game night, invariably there's a new game, and somebody spends 20 minutes explaining the rules to you. There are a lot of games out there.
Yeah, that's true. I do think that's part of why people end up sticking with a game, and why it's so hard to disrupt the top leaders in the game space.
And collectible games, yeah.
Yeah, the collectible games.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's all right. It's good to re-engage with this thinking because we knew it. And I for one am undeterred. This is definitely a project where it's like, imagine a world, and it's one of those things where the world isn't that way for a reason, right? So as an entrepreneur, you're saying, well, what if? But what if it was? So now you can build it and say, well, here's the thing: like, it's not because it doesn't exist. But that's different from solving the economic problem. Again, problem sounds great on paper. Inventory risk, supply chain, socially and economically, does it work? Does it become now more interesting experiential? Is there like a makerspace angle for shops? Is there a point of differentiation? Could it be more fun in a way, without replacing the standard model of doing it? That's all. Those are all art questions, question mark.
So it seems like it just, do we have to buy printers now for game shops?
Well, here's my thought. I don't think so. So number one, this is really like, find a couple of weirdos who own fairly successful game shops and think this would be a hoot. I personally know, and I'm not going to name the shop, but it's a major shop, and they have a huge online footprint, and they, the online is the secondary market trading card game online is the business, and it's a lucrative business. It's like it's a 7 figures a month type business, right? But they innovate. They do some fairly innovative things in their shop. And one of our friends who worked there, and what I'm talking about, Scott, spent time and figured out the whole pipeline for doing very high quality print on demand in store with foil booster packs and the whole shebang. And yeah, you know what? It's a 6-figure outlay for hardware. That's probably expensive in temp metal, but at the same time, you can hit a button and it'll spit out fully realized booster packs. So without even us talking about it, and without any kind of publishing model, they were already investing some resources into looking into that for some reason. So if we can find one or two shops like that in fairly major metro areas, then a great opportunity. Number one. Number two, kind of part of the whole idea is like, yeah, your purchasing of the card and the ability to sit there in the shop and play it is different from having a card you might want to put on the display case. We know there are super high-end printing services. If you want an art quality G-Clay print with a metallic ink and a special UV coating, and that's your favorite card in the world, the rarest card in all of Volition, a special UV coating, and that's your fine. But until then, you could almost just print it off on a Xerox machine if the point is just to have the card there to play with that night in the booster draft, then crumble it up and throw it in the trash after you scanned it, right? So the bar is not a super high-end printer. The bar is, do you have any printer?
Right. And I think there's a big potential to, if you have that, you're able to print that stuff. That does give stuff, projects like ours, the ability to be drafted and do sealed with, because you can print out those packs right there and they can play with the cards right there versus knowing the contents of the packs and stuff like that and bringing pre-built packs for draft, which doesn't make any sense. So it at least gives you that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of the, Sans distributed ledger. That was the very first vision.
Yeah.
And the distributed ledger just seemed like a way to meet that collect again. That's just part of why we released the game with a free print and play license, and we'll keep doing that because that was just a very clear way of establishing, the ledger exists if you care about collectability, if that's fun for you, right?
Yeah.
We should just hand out like printing plates to game shops so they can just print cards the old-fashioned way, stamp cards.
Like screen. Lithograph
Exactly. Lithography.
silk screen.
Yeah. Take it old school.
The old card printing shop. The metal what do they call it? The letterheads that they used to have to manually
exactly.
typeface.
Typeset. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're right. Some shops might have foil boosters, and some shops might have your Epson, home printer, because it doesn't matter. The whole point was to print, play at home or with friends. So you could span the whole gamut of print qualities.
Yeah, it's a pretty. The next step is still a pretty doable one. If we keep focusing on kind of MVP and proof of concept, which is what we've been doing precisely. So it's like after talking to Sprocket, it's like, hey, let's figure out the proper next iteration of the community license for the game. Let's remove the prohibition on sales. Give folks like Carlos, explicit permission to promote the game and even sell the game if they want to. Figure out the governance, because he was talking about how can the community of miners adopt new sets if they're not necessarily coming from us, and we'll see if that plays, but we can certainly do stuff like create a voting mechanism, some minimalist governance transactions, so people can adopt. Maybe there's a 60%, and we allow any transaction to go through, such as the published schema transaction. Again, license the address the terms to say if we're not publishing, somebody can. And then think about what technology we need to provision, ad hoc booster packs for specific retailers. And again, folks like Carlos who do want to print cards. ahead of demand. So
It's a direction.
it is. I was hoping to have some more stuff to announce about our board of directors. Unfortunately, the meeting this morning got canceled due to probable COVID. I haven't confirmed, but one of our attendees had to bail. So there's still some interesting folks, waiting to be involved officially, or who are involved officially. But I need to get a path to announcing that. Definitely people with deep connections to media properties and fairly substantial, names in the game design community. So TBD, I guess, to be announced, TBA.
Well, that's good. Still all on the table. So
Still waiting on our potential payment processor to pull the trigger and bring us through their compliance review. They're taking their sweet time.
but they did get back to you after a long delay. So
That's been it. It's been one of those every 6 weeks, kind of, which is the nature of the beast. But yeah, nothing new to report there.
okay. Well, we're at our 31-minute mark. We can call it, and hopefully have Carlos on next week, and we can continue the conversation.
There's plenty to keep talking about
Yep.
in this
Again,
weird little thing.
If anybody's watching and you want to jump on with us and talk with us and give your insights, we do this every week, half an hour. You don't even have to be on camera. You can just come in and be voice and chat with us and give your insights.
I know you're watching, Mom.
Is she?
All right.
All right, guys. We will continue next week.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.